today. And without further ado, let's hand this off to today's speakers.
Okay, great. Thanks all for your patience. My name is Camille Kroll-Lee, and I'm a product marketing engineer here at Tanzu Division in Broadcom. I've been here since 2021, but I have a much longer history in tech marketing. I've been doing this for about 18 years, mostly focused on emerging products, and super excited to be here today to speak with you about AI. And I'm joined by my colleague, Jonathan. Jonathan, do your intro now.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Eiler-Wervey. I've been launching products online for about 20 years. I co-founded a few startups, was head of product for a few others. 3 of those were acquired, 1 IPO'd. And I've been working with natural language and machine learning for about 15 years. Lately as the lead of a AI ML innovation practice at Pivotal Labs, and then more recently as an advisory service inside of VMware. And we started working with GPT-2 in 2019. And before that, I worked on a data protocol called the Semantic Web, did some work for Tim Berners-Lee. That didn't catch on. But all of that is to set up this point, which is that we have been here before. And there's lessons that we can apply from the history of technology adoption that can inform how we evaluate and deploy emerging technology today. And that's what we're going to talk about. State of the world, but with some opinion on what we think is going to happen next. Go ahead, Camille.
Yep, great. Let's move to that first slide and just kind of talk through our agenda pretty quickly. So the key learnings we're going to go through today for AI success, don't take our word for it. This is based on some research. And before I lose you, when I hear the word research, sometimes that put people to sleep. We do have a lot to share in terms of what's blocking organizations and how to solve these problems. So let's go to the next slide and quickly move over into the solutions piece. Next slide. So we should be on the keys to AI success. So organizations that are investing in digital transformation and app modernization, we've learned from this survey that we just completed a couple months ago. We've learned that they are more likely to be successful with AI initiatives. We've also learned that adopting cloud-native platforms and modern architecture is a precursor for success with AI in the enterprise. And we've also found some interesting trends about organizations reallocating budget from public cloud to fund these strategic AI initiatives. And let's go to the next slide. And so, as I said, don't take my word for it. You know, we asked 255 VP and above titles to provide us with their insight on how they're reducing complexity and abstracting infrastructure, how they're enhancing developer experiences and automation, how they are standardizing on platforms to gain visibility across their application estate, including AI apps, and how they are adopting paths. And so these were organizations that were $2 billion in revenue and more. So these are very large enterprise organizations. And we also followed it up with some qualitative interviews, which we'll get into in depth here. We'll provide some actual quotes so that you can learn and glean some things that you can utilize in your own AI transformation. So let's go to the next slide. So it's, you know, we ask these organizations, you know, where are you at in your journey? And 72% of them said they are actively deploying at scale, which means that these organizations have already gone through POC, multiple deployments, and have faced the challenges that you're going to run into if you have not already started this transformation. So you can appreciate and also understand that these organizations have real insights to offer you. So that's why we're hanging the whole presentation on this research today. If you can go to the next slide. And they are seeing top 3 benefits they are seeing are revenue growth, staff productivity, and increased customer engagement. So this is excellent news to see both a top-line growth as well as bottom-line productivity improvements. And let's go ahead and make this real, though. Let's go to the next slide, because we're going to talk a little bit about a specific situation in a telecom customer. This customer in our interview pointed out that they had a scenario where they had a high priority customer that came in when a brand new service support associate was just starting that evening, and they had already created an AI chatbot so that this person could actually query up to 7 documents that it took to process through a severity request like this and be able to provide resolution to the customer without anybody else being on the floor. And so they're quite excited at this organization to be able to centralize their support team so that they can actually bring together multiple resources and not necessarily need to have a dedicated staff person, because the AI chatbot enables the organization to scale. So this is just one example of one organization in one department that is planning to expand this across the entire division. But let's go to the next slide. So even though that's just one use case, one of the interesting things that came out of this research was that 76% of the respondents are going to plan to expand their business use cases. So they are seeing enough ROI, enough business value that they are ready to scale and expand. Next slide, please. And they are increasing their investment to the tune of between 20 and 30% annually. So across the board, lots of investment dollars going into these activities. So just know where your industry is and know that the investment is happening out there. We go to the next slide. And I mentioned and alluded to this earlier, but organizations that have decided to deprioritize public cloud are predominantly refocusing those dollars on AI and innovation. So there is definitely a priority shift going on. And here's what they're doing with their applications. Next slide, please. So predominantly, organizations are looking to modernize their existing application estate. Now, this is an important key metric. 65% focused on that activity. So they see a great deal of value in their current application estate. They just want to take advantage of the next set of trends. What it also says to us is that they want to use those that have expertise in those applications. So they want to use their current team. So this is a hurdle that you will run into as you're trying to deploy AI initiatives in your organization and specifically adding it to applications. So know that you will want to be looking for a polyglot or a really flexible platform or pattern to support adding AI to your existing apps with your existing team. So next slide, please. And in general, we saw a lot of discernment in these organizations about what they were spending their time on. So they have really prioritized budgets around applications that are best suited for AI at this time. And in the end, what the things they are focused on is, the cost of operations and eventually, making sure that the right apps have AI. So they're not blanketly applying it. They're definitely thinking about what is the right use case for the business and discerning what makes best sense. Next slide, please. And so, organizations that already have this discipline in place for constant modernization are far more likely to be successful in their AI initiatives. So please take note of this. Organizations that have 4 or more modernization initiatives in progress are between 25 and 50% more likely to experience efficiency, faster AI adoption, increased innovation, and faster time to market. So this constant discipline of modernization in the enterprise is something that we've been talking about for a long time, and it definitely has an effect. Next slide, please. But at the end of the day, as I stated earlier, a lot of these organizations have gotten to scale, and so they've already looked into the chasm of challenges, and I'm going to pass to Jonathan to go through what he's seen in terms of challenges.
Thanks, Camille. And what we're going to be talking about today is about adding AI capabilities, specifically reaching out to machine learning models within products. So this is about custom software. There's another conversation we're going to have about what kind of off-the-shelf things you buy and add to your IT stack, what kind of code assistance you might be using. For right now, we're talking about software development teams inside enterprises that are wanting to reach out to language models or other machine learning models and deploy them in their software. Next slide, please. The big theme that we're going to lean on is that ML-based apps, the last mile to quality is a long journey. I did not mean for that to be a haiku. It just kind of happened, but it works. In 2024, when we did these kinds of trend reports, the big story was that AI prototypes were not getting to production. We talked to consultancies that were doing thousands of these things. We heard numbers like 3%, 5% would go from a compelling demo all the way to something that hit customers. What we're talking about this year, it is still very hard to get to production, but we're going to be able to talk about the ones that made it through. And so there's enough of them out there that we can start to learn from them and identify common themes. We're going to look at the challenges being reported by these executive teams leading apps in production, but we're also going to be talking about the patterns we're seeing in the organizations that are succeeding. Next slide, please. All right, the top 3 problems reported by AI product teams are cost management, performance optimization, AI observability. But let's unpack that a little bit. Next slide. When we talk about AI quality, we are talking about one big trade-off. When a language model produces outputs, we can make those outputs pretty good. We have the technology to do that. We can stack models on models to create highly relevant, factually correct information. However, we also need to attack inference costs. Inference costs are the ongoing costs that it takes to run an application, the costs that run every time you reach out to that model. We can do accurate information. Accuracy here is defined broadly, meaning things like don't hallucinate and surface a correct answer, yes, but also be in pocket for things like legal, brand, user context at that particular moment. All of that I'm kind of describing as accuracy, good outputs. We can do that. But the question is, can we do that affordably? And these 2 things are in opposition. Doing both at the same time is hard. Next slide, please. So these trade-offs and optimizations are not always obvious. Ethan Molnick talks about a thing called the jagged frontier. He wrote this way back in 2023, but it's a pretty good metaphor. What he means is that things that seem hard are not always equally possible. There are going to be things that are inside a model's capability and things that are just outside of it where it falls over really hard. Inside of a training set and inside of the application's designed working space, we can get good results. The challenge is that we as product innovators, we have to chart the exact contours of what's going to work and what's not. And it's not easy to anticipate what a model will or won't be able to do until you're actually inside of it experimenting. So let's give you a real example of some trade-offs. Next slide, please. One of the big ones is model selection. In the early days, we had this idea that there was going to be one big model, then it was going to win. And so everybody was putting enormous amounts of money into training, and Google and OpenAI and Microsoft all wanted to be first to get to the big model that did everything. It hasn't shaken out of that way. What we're seeing now is that the models are probably as big as they are going to get because we are out of internet and words to scrape. We have scraped everything that is out there. And now what we are doing is chasing quality by looking at specialist models and looking at models that are less expensive to run. So those are those 2 axes that you can approach. Specialist models are things like reasoning models, code models. I think we're going to continue to see a trend towards models that are tuned to a specific domain. You may see some that are particularly good at law, particularly good at customer service, as we are basically shaping the outputs coming out of the everything model to be a little bit more specific and therefore higher quality within a particular box. The other direction is, can we attack those big models and make them cheaper? DeepSeek made a bunch of headlines because it produced something that hit the same benchmarks as GPT-4, but it was about 80% cheaper to run. That model or that distillation approach has been proven, so that there's a bunch of other people chasing it. We're seeing costs come down. That's good, both from an electricity and carbon and data center standpoint. but also because we can now look for the appropriate model for our situation. Next slide. The model that we end up with is not obvious on the outset. You're going to have to look at selecting the thing. We expect Thrash to continue in terms of new models dropping and new decision criteria coming in. You may start with a model that says, hey, this is cheap and we like it, but you may decide, actually, this isn't going to work. We need to go up to a different model, a bigger model, newer model. So that's one trade-off. There's a bunch of others, and these things have to be discovered by a product team as they're working. Next slide. Okay, so safety procedures that have to happen. Model selection is one of them, but there's a bunch of other things that have to be ongoing after a product ships. When a traditional software product ships, we send it over the line, it passes a bunch of tests, it goes through some quality gatekeepers, and then that deployment is considered good for a while. Observability in that world is just about making sure it's still lit up and turned on, right? What we are seeing with any product that is built on machine learning. Next slide. There's a ongoing maintenance cost. Oh, okay. Let me shift gears a little bit. I had a conversation with somebody that was a little bit jaw dropping. Go ahead and hit the next slide. My reaction to it was quite strong, but this is kind of the vibe of where we're at. People are realizing that the road to quality is long. There's a lot of pressure on them to show results. There have been an enormous amount of investment, and we're now walking that back. The particular person I was speaking to, when he said, I'm tired of hearing about ROI, was making a nuanced point about the difference between efficiency and revenue growth. His point was, when we're growing productivity, what we're actually doing is growing the business, and that's going to look differently than if you're coming at it with an efficiency lens. If you're saying, hey, I've got a team that's X more capable, therefore I can have fewer people, that's not actually what's happening. What's happening is teams are more capable, they're doing good work, they're growing businesses, we're seeing those outcomes, but that's not strictly linear. Go ahead to the next slide. So there's this vibe going on that initially we thought this was going to be easy, and then we said, oh, this is going to be a little tough, and now we're like, we're kind of in this bargaining phase. Next slide. What I realize is that this is basically the 5 stages of grief that we started with. Oh, okay, all this is going to be great. And personally, I'm kind of looking forward to like the Depression era. I've got some whiskeys picked out. I've got a really thick blanket. It's going to be awesome. But perhaps we could skip all the way to acceptance, where we say, okay, so ML products, machine learning products, have some unique attributes that we have to figure out. But once we're there, if we develop them correctly, we can get value from them. Next slide. Okay, so the fundamental challenge is, can we get good outputs for a given inference cost? Next slide. Here's one of our CIOs. This is a VP of IT. How to observe, how to find production issues out of an AI application is the biggest challenge. Just defining that for an AI application is tough because you are in a process of something which is ever evolving and ever changing. Next slide. So this evaluation capability is one that organizations that have been successful are leaning into pretty hard. With a traditional software application, which we'll call deterministic apps, you put in a given input, it's going to get the same output every time. With a inference model, you're going to see different outputs for the exact same situation. You're also going to find users that are expanding what that model is exposed to, and sometimes in adversarial ways. Next slide. There are some examples from business that we can use to pattern off of. If you set up a call center, no one would think that, hey, once the phones are plugged in, my job is done, right? You're going to say, well, we need to provide scripts, and we need to provide some guidance, and we need to evaluate our agents to make sure that they're behaving in the best possible way. And we need to sometimes make adjustments and fix things. All right, next slide. The same pattern is going to play out for models built on inference. There's going to be an ongoing concern of watching those things, looking for ways to tune them, and there's going to be a feedback mechanism from the apps as they're running back into the next version of the model or the next version of the app, system prompts, that sort of thing. Next slide. One of the biggest challenges was red teaming the model for inaccurate information or hallucinations. We actually had to do manual testing or manual red teaming, and it took us close to 2 months to do that. It's a challenge. It's hard. So if your idea was, hey, we just shipped and now we're done, we're at the finish line, cool. Actually, you just started, right? Red teaming is a good pattern. Next slide. So let's talk about what those teams are and how they work together. We talk to a lot of teams, and so some of this is based on our research, the formal stuff. Some of it is a little bit looser, where we're just having a lot of conversations with folks. But this is what we saw. In the old days, we had application teams. They had a data science team that sometimes produced in-house models. We had platform teams that helped them access infrastructure. There was a middle period where a bunch of stuff happened. It was very loud. We have settled down to where we now have a business leadership, application teams, an AI team, and a platform team. Like, these are more or less the terrain you're going to find in most organizations that are well matured. They may call it slightly different things. That's fine. But you're going to see these functions delivered across lots of organizations. Next slide. So the AI team is going to be the team that is the voice of product safety for models. They're going to be involved in model selection. They're probably involved in ML ops and making sure that models are performant. But one of the big interface points with the application teams is going to be defining what's allowed and what's safe to do. There's a progression you can go through. The very first phase is everybody does everything, everything's fine, just go do stuff. That doesn't last very long in a highly regulated industry. If you work in finance or healthcare, like, this is not going to be a winning play. So then you get gatekeepers. That gatekeeper is probably going to set a bunch of rules. They may say, we need to approve everything going out the door. Now they have a backlog. And if you say want to modify a piece of software because you're delivering continuously, now you have to get back in the backlog. And now people are waiting, and there's a lot of frustration going on there. What happens from that is what we're calling the shadow IT scenario, which is that, hey, we'll never get approval for this thing, so let's just do it really quietly. Let's run it on some infrastructure we can control. Let's connect to something that nobody knows about. And we'll get the product shipped, and we'll just do our evaluation there. If that goes to prod, oopsie. That's not great either. Next slide. What we propose as an alternative is having a platform work as a product, that your platform team is giving folks a approved path towards good infrastructure that is done in coordination between the platform team and this AI team, so that the AI team sets standards for what's allowed, for what kind of models to access, for the different kinds of data that can live in different locations. And then the easiest thing for an application team to do is to adopt that platform. If that platform is attractive and successful on its own merits, you don't have to worry about compliance because you're paving a path into the most compliant thing. Next slide, please. All right. We've been building products on LLMs for a little bit. This is the thing that I see working. It's a little bit different from how we launch products in the old days. In the old days, the things that were risky were things like the product market fit and like the actual interface design of, like, here's a mobile phone and things like that. So the excuse me, I just got a phone call from my kid. I'm gonna ignore it for a moment. But in the old days, you had a product that you'd be holding out the mobile phone, you do high fidelity mockups without much data behind them, and you let the users interact with them. What we're seeing in a machine learning product is that we want to prove out that formula of good outputs at a reliable cost. And we want to do that early. It doesn't have to be in a fully realized product. We can just test the inputs. So things like RAG, retrieval augmented generation, are going to stuff a bunch of data into a model from a bunch of different data sources. Now, you can wire all that stuff up and get it running and then go and see if you get a good result. But you can also stuff all of that stuff in manually and just load all those prompts in and see if you get good results. So what we're seeing is that the high fidelity data and high fidelity infrastructure is moving way up the design process, and then you build the application later if you get to a good result. So it's a little bit of an inversion of how we would traditionally do product launch. All right, next slide, please. Um, what we are seeing is how the platform teams and the AI teams can support that model of innovation, where you have to be touching real infrastructure and real data early, is and do that safely with appropriate privacy, with appropriate access controls, is this AI middleware pattern. Now, we sell one of those. Spoiler. We're happy to have you come use ours. But if you don't use ours, you should use someone else's, or you should build your own. Because what you're going to want to do is use this as the mechanisms that the AI team uses to implement all of their safety policies, and it's going to provide hooks to do all of the eval. So you're going to give those eval tools to every single application team so that as they learn through painful experience that the long road to quality requires really good eval tools, you've already given them those and you've got them used to using them early and often, so that as they are developing their product, they're also building muscles to work on AI product quality. All right. If we've got questions, fire them off in the chat, and AJ is going to jump in and interrupt us. But with that, I'm going to hand back to Camille. Next slide, please. Who's going to run us through the next section?
Thanks, Jonathan. And now that Jonathan has taken us to the edge of the cliff of the trough of disillusionment about AI, we're going to come back together and talk to you about some solutions. Let's go to the next slide. So, taking it back to the research, not surprisingly, complexity, based on what Jonathan was just talking about in terms of complexity of just model selection, complexity in AI applications was the largest cited thing as being a hindrance to getting to value in the enterprise with AI. So, not surprisingly, we talked about, one model to rule them all. And we've all determined that that is probably not the way to go. Plus, models are constantly changing. So it's likely that organizations will be constantly changing which models they're using with their AI applications. Another great example is Model Context Protocol. Model Context Protocol is a huge specification that enables agentic patterns. But it came out in November, and there was a second iteration in February of this year, and another one just in June. So as trends are really shifting super quickly, the complexity piece does get compounded. Can we go to the next slide, please? And, this is nothing new. Modern applications have had these challenges as well. In terms of, the AI or the app team really wants to get their apps into market. They don't want to be concerned with infrastructure or complexity or compliance. They want to see their apps in the wild doing great things. They want to innovate. And then the platform teams are left to kind of try and increase consistency and ensuring that the path to production is secure and, handling all the updates and failovers over time. So can you click again, please? And this just means, more complexity when you're adding a third team into the mix, when you're adding a data and AI team that needs to vet and certify and then provide a list of approved models to the development team. They also need to constantly evaluate those models and ensure they're performing as expected. They might be able to take those models and potentially distill them to get better cost control, and they'll need to re-provide those back to the platform engineering organization in order to have them be available for the app developer. So there's a lot of concerns that are new in terms of AI. Next slide, please. Oops, it should go to the bar. Okay. So, not surprisingly, 98% of our respondents were very keen to utilize a platform as part of their sidestepping the complexity issue. So, 50% of those are planning on purchasing a platform, but, there was 27 that already planned on using their existing platform, which is excellent. Scale is quite difficult with AI because the iteration pattern is so quick. Next slide, please. But, these organizations, 93% of them are indicating that their platform engineering discipline in general is extremely important to their success, and specifically in accelerating adoption. So, this is a people, processes, and technology approach. As we've always said, Jonathan with his labs background, this is the trifecta of things you want to consider when you're actually getting ready to scale your AI applications. Next slide, please. And, not surprisingly, also, decision makers wanted to get more value out of the work that they had done to prepare these apps for market. They really wanted their platforms to be able to help them scale and provide repeatable patterns so that they can get more value out of that exploration. So decision makers noted that platforms were great for pre-trained models and maturity, for ease of the back-end data integration, for support of compliance and governance, and the ability to scale and reuse. Okay, next slide, please. So this is our aha here. Tansy platform is based on Cloud Foundry and has been around for a long time, and it is our continued commitment that we're going to provide an AI-ready private PaaS. And PaaS is extremely important for AI for all the complexity reasons we just went through, for the model swapping and no-code model swapping without having to refactor, and to ensure that you can utilize your current skills. And Jonathan will dive a little bit more into this in a moment. But Cloud Foundry does a really top-notch job of providing the essential and important things for developers, but abstracts away the infrastructure and the complexity and the toil piece. So, there's no need for Docker files, there's no YAML, there's no infra setup. Devs just get access to services, including AI models, directly in the platform. And that way they can have an automated and instant way to try these things out. It just reduces the friction overall and does it all with guardrails. Next slide, please. So Tanzu AI Solutions is a set of capabilities in our Tanzu platform. It provides an opinionated approach to AI app development, meaning it comes with the built-in best practices and configurations and optimizations we've just talked about today. So that is great when you're adding this new audience into the mix. So Tanzu platform enables your AI experts to capture the right things to do in an executable, repeatable way with templates. So, your AI experts do not need to know anything about the application, and the app team doesn't need to know about the privacy, security, and legal concerns of the model. They just need to focus on developing innovative and exciting new opportunities to utilize AI. And your platform engineers know the safest and most resilient way and compliant way to manage all those things over time. Next slide, please. But this all leads to sustainable patterns. Whether you are doing internal or external applications, organizations want this to work consistently with their existing tools. They don't want to have to retrain their teams. They want to take advantage of this now. And so Jonathan's now going to go through kind of like what the specifics of the new architecture will look like and provide you a little bit more on the technicals on the platform.
Thanks, Camille. So update, camp has been canceled on account of thunderstorms, but we are failing over to the second availability zone on the carpool, so kit is handled. Next slide, please. All right, let's talk about agents. This was the year of the agent. I heard that all the way through 2024 is that next year it was coming. And it's here, kind of. But what we're seeing is that agentic applications are going to be applications that are talking to models, but they're also using models to integrate with other sources. So if you think of an intelligent application as a model that talks to data and inference, what we're going to start seeing with the agentic pattern is that the inference itself can facilitate integration to other things. These are soft integrations where in the old world, we might have had an API with very specific nouns and verbs. I can say, here's a credit card detail and here's a transaction. Can you go and run the card for me, right? Two pieces of data that are known coming in, and then there's a action that it's able to take. What we are seeing with the agentic pattern is that we are able to integrate in a much more flexible and fluid way, where you can say things like, hey, robot that handles all the conference rooms, I'm looking for a specific kind of conference room. You've got descriptions of those. What can you do for me? And it comes back and says, well, here's all the things I'm able to do to a conference room. And it says things like, I need about 20 people. Do you have anything like that? And it reads the descriptions and says, based on these descriptions of rooms, I think I'm going to suggest one of these three that are available. It's a much more back and forth, nuanced conversation that is potentially very, very powerful if it's done safely and within guardrails, right? So we've got some ways to do that. Next slide, please. Model context protocol is a thing that lots of folks are talking about. I hear folks using it a little bit incorrectly. It is a networking protocol. It is the dotted line in between nodes. Next slide. Which means that you have a client-server relationship. You have an MCP client, that's your application. You have MCP servers, that's the thing on the other end saying, hey, I know some things about conference rooms. And then you've got a model in between that helps negotiate the handoff between those two things, right? So MCP is a protocol, will be the one that wins, probably, but we're not entirely sure. Go ahead, next slide. This was released in November of 2024 by Anthropic, and it was basically a suggestion for here's an open protocol for communicating with a model in a way that helps you call functions and send data back and forth. There are other versions of that that have been locked to a vendor. This was the first that was pretty open. We got on this pretty early. We are open standard kind of folks, and so we helped build the Java SDK with Anthropic. So if you have a reference app for Java, you're going to build an MCP server, you'll use our code. This was built by the Spring team, so they know a lot about good patterns in Java apps. Since then, some of the vendor lock-in kind of folks also went and got on board with MCP. So the Googles, the Microsofts, Amazon have all said, yeah, this is the thing that we want to support. There's a bit of momentum. There's also people realizing, hey, this doesn't have a whole lot of opinions about security and access controls. That's a fairly important concern in an enterprise. So we're versioning that protocol, and it's going to get better over time. And we're working through some of those questions now. Some of those are going to be handled in the protocol itself. Some of those are going to be the platform you wrap around that protocol. So understanding what the boundaries of that should be will take some time. But what we think is very likely to happen is that the protocol is going to be a fairly neutral conversation. It is the transport layer. The things that are on either side are going to be handling access controls, and we think that middleware pattern is going to hold up. So we're working on MCP features. I can't announce anything official, but that is a direction we're moving in really hard. Where we are today, we don't see a ton of people running MCP in high-risk domains inside enterprises. That has not occurred. What has occurred is that inside developers' laptops, it is connecting their code editor, their documentation, their test harnesses, their Jira tickets, all of those things within the context of the laptop are all talking to each other. This is probably a leading indicator of this protocol getting really good because a bunch of software developers are spending time with it and nailing out bugs and feature requests and all of that stuff. It seems pretty promising for the overall direction. Once they start reaching out to external data sources, so Jira has an MCP server, that desktop application now might start reaching out to external parties, and that's where you're going to see a lot of attention to things like security and privacy and making sure that it's behaving in the ways that we expect it to. Next slide. All right, so here's the big idea around agents. Agents are an integration pattern. The actual agentic models are probably not developed by Fortune 500, right? They're developed by a model vendor, or it is an open source, open license model that you're installing in your own data center. So the agentic piece is not the differentiator. The differentiator for a team that wants to be competitive is going to be what kind of tools and data and activity is available to that agentic application. So that is an integration pattern. If a agent can access a bunch of things safely that know about different aspects of your enterprise, that use your proprietary in-house, your own data, and it can start reaching out to those systems and making changes and doing things that are impactful, then you're going to unlock a lot of value. And I think that's where people are going to be competing, is how quickly they can turn those systems online. All right, next slide. All right. You'll need to have some level of integration. That could be through APIs. It could be through extract, transform, load transactions. It has its own integration platform to allow AI to work with most applications that are relevant to the age. This is from VP of IT in the retail industry. Next slide. All right. This middleware pattern, we're very committed to it. The idea here is not that we have any proprietary stuff on either end. It can talk to any model. It can talk to any coding language in your applications. If you want to build in Java, great. We've got Spring AI, a framework that helps you do that with appropriate abstractions. We're quite pleased with it. If you want to build in Python, great. Go build in Python. Build JavaScript apps, Python apps, .NET, whatever you've got. But it can flow through a common gateway that is the hook where your AI team is putting in all of their safety and eval hooks. On the other end of that, we're going to be thrashing through models. The models will keep changing. It'll be competitive. Next slide. All right, here's how this works in our product. You have a CF push experience. That's the old Cloud Foundry push, meaning we're abstracting away all the infrastructure. All your developers know is that they've got a container that it runs in, and that container is rock solid stable. They send it up there, and then they've got the CF bind process, meaning you can attach to lots of services inside an enterprise. That's going to be data, but now it's also going to be inference. And potentially it is going to be things like MCP server endpoints. You can bind with them today. We think we're going to be able to add more value to that as time goes on. But you're going to be able to wire up all of these things from a list of approved options. And this is really the key point, is that it's not freedom to do anything, but it is freedom to very easily do the things that you're approved to do. And that's where you're going to have a single point of control for safety across the enterprise, while also giving the self-serve pattern that developers just turn things on. And that's going to let them do the small experiments with real infrastructure and real models that are going to unlock product innovation. If they can have a development team say, hey, we've got a bunch of data, let's point a model at it and see if we can make sense of it and see if we can do anything interesting with that. The speed with which you can wire that up is going to create the throughput of, we tried 5 things and one of them was really impactful. Next slide. All right, we've got a bunch of pieces of the stack. Our goal for the Tanzu platform customers is that you can turn this thing on and very quickly get your AI teams up and running. That includes our application runtimes. It also includes a bunch of data products. We have mostly data products focused on big, high-scale enterprises. That is the Green Plum option. Gemfire is a solution that's very, very fast in memory storage. RabbitMQ is a message bus for communicating across that. All of those are well-supported leaders in their fields. Next slide. Wrapping up, our point of view is that this is just software, and all the things that make software maintainable and quick to market still apply. For an application developer, they should be able to go on and spin up a model. They should be able to connect to data sources. They should do all that in whatever language they prefer working in. And it should be abstracted at the appropriate level where they're focused on the things that they're worried about, which is model outputs, user experience, business value. For the AI teams, we want to give them a single control plane for the entire enterprise, where they are providing really high quality, desirable options, models, data sources, that then attract developers to adopt those and become the default option for what they're doing. And then as their safety protocols change, they can roll that out across all of the applications in the fleet without having to stop and go back and redeploy a bunch of code in the apps. All right, next slide. I think that's it. Camille.
Yeah, great. So just to wrap up, we're going to, next slide, please. We're going to just reiterate, what we've learned. Organizations that are already heavily invested in digital transformation and app modernization have a stronger likelihood to be successful with the new world of AI. They can also sidestep a lot of the complexity by adding a cloud native app platform, which we offer. So it's much easier to make that transition with a platform. And we also know that organizations are starting to really double down on these strategic AI initiatives by reorienting budget dollars away from public cloud and into this space because they're seeing great value. And we're fortunate to be able to speak with them regularly about what they're doing. We're always happy to talk with you about use cases, by the way. So in the follow-ups, we'll have ways to contact the Tanzu team. You can go to the next slide. But our recommendation is to start with a business case and a pilot. To Jonathan's point, the closer you can get it to a production-ready system will really cut down on your testing because of the non-determinism of the models you're going to add in here. So we will also follow up with our link to our 90-day free trial, so you can take a look at potentially utilizing our AI capabilities in TNC platform. But there are some things about use cases, again, that we're totally willing to talk with you about. So if you need to speak to your Tanzu route, we highly encourage that. Also there is, if you can go to the next slide, there is a resource that Jonathan and I collaborated on for the CIO. So it's a checklist for safer and more scalable AI applications. It'll take you through all of the kind of best practices you'll need to put in place in order to get ready, in order to avoid some of this shadow IT and the gatekeeping. It kind of walks you through. It's 7 pages. It's detailed, but it's not everything in the kitchen sink. Definitely, there will be specifics to your organization that you'll want to apply. But anybody that's just getting started or has done a POC but is struggling to get to ROI, this will really help you as a resource. Next slide, please. Oh, there we go. And don't forget, we are going to be hosting VMware Explorer in Las Vegas. There will be a track for modern applications, including the AI. So there will be folks on site to speak with you if you have questions or specific use cases you'd like to run by us. We're always happy to meet you in Las Vegas. Okay, and with that, do we have any questions?
We do have a question here. Let me read it to you guys. There's so much shadow IT and shadow AI in my organization already. Lots of snowflake tooling for team-specific use cases. Are there strategies and tactics that have been successful for central IT teams working to wrangle this?
Yeah, I can take that. So I'm going to draw on some history with working in medical devices, where you saw some of the hard gatekeepers, but also working in things like front end components and design systems. What we have found is that if you approach your developers as the customer of a platform, that if you give them a thing that you should be sort of treating them as a potential buyer for good solutions. And that requires a little bit of customer orientation by the platform team, is that they're going to reach out and say, like, well, what do you need to solve? And like, what are the minimum requirements on your end to start adopting these things? What we're seeing is that a dedicated platform team is almost always going to outcompete developers figuring it out for the first time. If you are approaching it with an open mind and some learning, and you're saying, all right, hey, dev teams, like, let's go give you the best version of a model or a data source, and then you're encoding that with all of the safety stuff that you want to see as an organization. That helps quite a bit, and getting into a self-serve pattern means you're not creating this gatekeeper mentality where they resent having to ask for permission to do things. They want to ship their products. They want to reach their customer milestones and outcomes. If you go in saying that you're going to be an accelerator, it's a very different conversation than if you're saying you got to check in with us and wait for us to get back to you.
Yep, yep. And I think there's, we've actually seen this in a customer where they had 40,000 ChatGPT inquiries and they had to wrangle that back. Their experience, they're not a public reference, but I will tell you, their experience was that once they made cloud or TNC platform available to to the teams that were drawing the most traffic, they were so excited because it was so quick to just stamp out environments and put their application in it that they adopted. So, there is something to be said for the repeatability and scale that you get, and teams can be still pretty happy. Of course, the self-service option is always ideal for development teams as well. So hope that answered your question. Any other questions?
I do have one here. What kind of testing does a software team do, and is there an equivalent of unit tests for models?
Um, yeah, I can talk about that a little bit. It's going to look a little different, but there's going to be this sort of a similar idea of a unit test and integration test, system tests in our test pyramid that we see with traditional software. You're going to do similar activities inside of a AI or ML based application. Um, and what we're going to see is that there's this progression from let's get it running on our laptop. Let's start poking at the model. Let's do some risk analysis, thinking about what can go wrong. Let's like sort of game out some of that stuff. You don't need the full application to be built to do any of those things. So you can start doing some of that testing where you've got a range of outcomes that you're expecting. Um, and then one of the key things is getting a live eval solution in where you're logging every input and every output. Having that built into the application from day one or pretty soon thereabouts is going to be quite powerful. And that's where this middleware pattern gives you that, because you can basically say, all right, connect to the gateway. You're going to get to the model through there. Here are the hooks that you're going to use to start grabbing all of that data. Inputs and outputs, the logging is challenging because there's a bunch of private data in there, so it can't just be like landing on a text file sitting on an FTP server. It's got to be somewhere secure. But if you put that pattern in place, you're going to start building the reps and the muscle memory inside those teams to figure out what the appropriate level of evaluation is. And that's going to be things like let's start looking for like what's coming out of the system and during the dev cycle, like understanding kind of where our best and worst case outputs are. But then you can also start doing like automation around that. There are, for example, models that look for jailbreaks. And if you see somebody that's probing, it'll detect that. It's a very fast, cheap classifier that can sit on the middleware and basically say all the inputs coming in, we're testing those and saying they got to reach a threshold of probably okay. If it's obviously not okay, it's going to reject that call, and then it fails over to whatever your error path is. Um, on the way back, you're going to do similar stuff with outputs. You're going to be looking for things like bad words and private data. There are models you can stack on your models. The costs add up quickly. So you're going to want to have like live data from real infrastructure to like try to evaluate whether this is actually going to work. Um, but that's sort of what you're going to look like. It's sort of a continuously running guardrail as opposed to a unit test at the time of deploy. But your pattern of let's have all of these checks that add up over time and that we sort of build this competency of knowing what to ask for, that will probably feel pretty similar.
Okay. So we look like we're out of time, but are there any last questions?
I think there are, but you know what? I think that might mean we just have to bring you both back on for another webinar in the future.
Sure, we can do that. We can talk about AI a lot. All
I do
right.
want to just say thank you to you both, Camille, to Jonathan. This has been recorded and will be available on demand shortly after the end of this presentation. Any last words from you guys before we close out?
We're
My
Go ahead.
mantra is PaaS is the way. PaaS is the way to AI. So that's my parting thought. Jonathan, you got a parting thought?
Yeah, just if you're on Tanzu platform right now and you're struggling with any of this stuff, come talk to us. We're happy to share. We want to see you guys be successful. So talk to your Tanzu rep or reach out to me and Camille directly, and we've got a bunch of advisory stuff that we can come in and do talks and debug and hang out. We're happy to do that.
Thank you both. And if you are not yet registered, there's still time to register for VMware Explore taking place in Las Vegas, August 25th to the 28th. There will be some great sessions there around AI. Maybe you'll see some of these speakers there in person as well. We hope to see you guys there. We hope to see you at our next event. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, Camille and Jonathan. We hope to see you guys later. Have a great day, all.